Welcome to Beyond the Music. My name is Ian O'Donnell and I'm here with Brian Smith.
Hello.
On today's episode, we're going to be going over part 2 of our mega podcast on Civilization 6 music. Today, we're going to be doing our top 5 themes from Asia, Africa, and Oceania. Before we get started, let's give a brief refresher on how these themes work in Civilization 6.
So last week we went over themes from Europe and the Americas, and Civilization 6 has themes based on different countries from around the world. And within each country, there are 4 sub-themes based on different eras. There's an ancient era theme, medieval, industrial, and atomic era. And as the eras go on, the themes become more involved and more complex. So with that said, let's go ahead and get to our top 5 themes from Civilization 6.
Number 5, we have Congo. This was written by Russell Robinson, and it's overall it's a pretty simple sounding melody. It's a type choral piece. It's written, the chords it's using a 1, 4, 5, really simple stuff, mostly just a major scale. And it's just a really common folk song that's heard in West Central Africa, that kind of area.
It's very pretty. It's very relaxing to listen to. Some of the other themes are real energetic or evoke a certain type of mood. They want you to be sad or happy or energetic. This is just real peaceful. The melodies, like you said, from a major scale, it always puts me in a good mood, and it's actually written in the form of a round. And if you're unfamiliar, a canon in D is in a round. It has a similar structure.
Right, and Row, Row, Row Your Boat, the kind of
that's a great example.
That's another example of a round. It's really similar in the way it's kind of structured so that it can be sung by, I think a chorus usually of about 3 vocal parts. With the way it's written for most ensembles.
Yeah, so you'll have a vocal part start the melody, and then part way through you have another vocal melody start it, and then a third one starts it, and that's how you get the round, and it's very continuous, and it's unique. And
like we said, it uses really simple chords and simple melodies, a major scale, so it has this really consonant sort of, like you said, almost a peaceful, kind of happy, cheerful sound to it, compared to some of the other themes that are very aggressive in some cases or use strange scales. This one's very, very
just 1, 4, 5.
Yeah, it's
nice.
Just it's fun to listen to. It really is. And the way it's instrumentated, because we're using piano reductions, of course, but just listen to it sung by a choir and such. It sounds fantastic.
So, with all that said, let's take a listen to it. All right, so that was number 5 with the Congo. Now we continue on to number 4, which is Japan.
Right. So this is a lullaby. It's kind of a folk song that's very well known in Japan and very, very loved in general. It's from the Itsuki village. I believe I'm going to just put a disclaimer out there.
Yes, for any
all these names, we may mispronounce some of them. We tried to get some help from Google Translate and some other places, but this is the best we can do.
We're simple folky.
We're simple folk. Right. But this came from this village that's in southern Japan in the mountainous region. And so it was kind of isolated from mainland Japan for a long time, probably just because of having to traverse the mountains. It wasn't a very rich area. What's really interesting about this is they actually had their own dialect there too. So there's multiple versions of the song, some in, actually in Japan, in Japanese rather, and then some that were in the native tongue in that area. So it's been around for a long time. Many people have studied it and learned it and things along those lines. That's why it made it into this game.
So with Congo, we talked about how it was a 1-4-5, very major sound, very happy. This is in a minor, mysterious sounding key, so it's very different. And it's a lullaby, and it was discovered by a school teacher in 1935, long after the song had ceased to be sung. You have some more on how it kind of came through generations.
Right, because it was more of like an oral tradition rather than kind of written out. It was sung by babysitters or that were taking care of the babies for like the richer families and for the poorer families and things like that. It was very much like a servant type position. But what was happening there is during the Heian period, I believe that's the pronunciation, after the Genji Nikkei War, these two families that were fighting against each other, after the Genjis won, the other family ended up settling around this village where the song was written, and so it created kind of this caste system of like the really rich Genjis because they won, and everyone else was very poor and kind of like subservient in a lot of ways. So like even in the song you hear them talking about they wear nice clothes and we're of the poor families and such. But one of the reasons we thought this was really interesting and we wanted to mention it was because the Genjis had like sent these samurai from their family to look over the city. I mean, the village rather. But it's the Genji. It's the word Genji.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we figured we need to do some more research on it too, and we'll get back to y'all.
Yeah.
But it's like from Overwatch.
Yeah, because we had been exposed to it, and it's always exciting when you are exposed to something that you don't think necessarily has a rich history. So you hear the word Genji and you might not associate it with something, and then you do some research and you discover there's this rich history of folklore that you can learn a lot about. And it's a great thing about learning from other cultures is just stuff you might not know about, and it's fun to learn, because you hear the names in pop culture. And another thing we really liked about this is you mentioned some of the lyrics. They are very sad, and it's a somber tone, and you think, oh, it's a Japanese. We don't really have anything like that here. Well, the song "Ring Around the Rosie" is very similar. We all grew up listening "Ring Around the Rosie," "Pocket Full of Posy," "Ashes, Ashes, 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 We All Fall Down." It's about the Black Plague. Also, not a happy time, but it's passed down through generations, and it's just another way how worldwide we all do the same thing with these stories and pass them down through generations. It's very cool.
Yeah, because like I was just mentioning, this Japanese folk tune is known by people all over Japan. It's very, very popular. So
just like "Ring Around the Rosie" is
right,
very
exactly.
popular
It's
here.
very, very good comparison to kind of like what we have in our culture. So here's what this sounds like.
All right, Ian, we are on to number 3, which is near and dear to my heart, is Arabia. I've mentioned before, I was born in Saudi Arabia, so anytime we can discuss this type of music, I get really excited. I don't have a lot of chances to study this, so doing this podcast with these themes, I really love that we are able to dive deep into it. And Arabic, not necessarily Saudi Arabia specifically, but Arabic music, it has roots in poetry. And again, like all the other themes we've discussed, it has its roots in folk stories, like the German theme we've talked about already. It's all these are connected, through folk songs.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this and Middle Eastern music in general is a lot of our modern music kind of stems from there as far as the instrumentation goes, because the lute came from the Arabic instrument, the oud, right? And then there's also the classical guitar came from Middle Eastern countries as well. And even the word tar, kind of like a fun fact, it means string. So like sitar, guitar, right? It's like different versions of stringed instruments. And really, ultimately, they all came out of the Middle East.
Yeah, so I believe it was the 10th century, Arabic music started developing a lot more, and French troubadours would come through on their markets and trade routes, and they would take these ouds, the Arabic instruments, back with them, and eventually it would translate back to England, where they developed it and changed it to the lute, which is very, very popular in English madrigals. You hear it in medieval times, and Arabic music, though not necessarily in this Civilization 6 theme, for example, it's often characterized with vocal melodies, which we've seen in another podcast.
Right. When we were talking about Uncharted 3, we mentioned that a lot of because a lot of it took place in the Middle East, and you heard a lot of these vocal melodies sung by like a woman, almost replicating like a voice. And this was kind of something that was happening during the 10th century, where a lot of Arabic music was kind of focusing as vocals as like a primary instrument.
And these vocal suites, which were a staple of early Arabic music, they focused on melody and rhythm as opposed to harmony. A lot of Western music, we focus on chords and things of that nature, where these were more melodic, which makes sense because voices have a very melodic sound as opposed to, some of the instruments. And a lot of their early musical works were vocals. And that leads into how their scales in Middle Eastern music are different from how scales are in Western music.
Right. So just fundamentally, the music is approached completely differently. There's not necessarily completely differently, but there's these things called like microtones rather. So if you think about a half step, like going from
a real popular one is between the note E and E flat. That to Western music, that is a half step, but in Arabic music there are
notes between it. If you think of like a blues scale or someone bending a note on a guitar, where it it's like dun 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 kind of a thing. It's sort of that. So there's like notes that are in between the notes that are like on a piano for us that they consider actual notes, right?
So if you see a picture or a video of somebody playing a sitar, they have the giant frets. That's because they're playing all those semi and microtones in between what we consider our half and whole steps.
Yeah, look up some microtonal music or there's some guitars that have no frets on them, right? So that you can play chromatic type music. Not chromatic rather. I suppose it would be chromatic, but microtonal music. Just listen to it. It's very strange if you've never heard it before.
And we always associate Arabic music with the harmonic minor scale. That is very popular, very characteristic of Arabic music. It's not exactly the same in Western music mimicking Arabic music as traditional Arabic music, because like we say, you can't get those microtones and semitones to completely replicate that style.
Right, but that harmonic minor is really close to it, and it's something kind of that definitely in Western culture that's kind of how you can evoke a sort of Middle Eastern sound.
Yes, I don't want to say it's cliche but it almost is cliche. You think in the desert, let's just put it in harmonic minor, and for reason, because it's used a lot in that region. With that said, let's go ahead and hear what that Arabic theme sounds like.
So for number 2, we have China's theme. This theme is based off of a pentatonic scale, and so we have pentatonic scales in Western culture music, which is used in like rock. It's a very general type scale and such. But it's a little bit different in China, but penta still, at the root, it means 5 notes. So it's a 5-note scale, and Brian has some research on that.
Yeah, so these 5 notes in the China theme from Civilization 6, F sharp, A, B, D, E. The tricky thing is if you say pentatonic scale, how we are used to hearing that, you think of blues or a rock sound in Western music. You think of the Allman Brothers or Led Zeppelin because they use pentatonic. Could not be more different in how it's implemented. And these scales are not used the same way in Chinese music as opposed to American music.
And the instrumentation of this theme is really interesting what they're using. So you found some info on the instrument itself.
Yeah, it's called a guzheng. I hope I'm pronouncing that.
And I believe we were saying it's similar to like a
lap harp.
A lap harp. I don't know. That's what we've talked about this before. But yeah, it just kind of you can sit on your lap or on a table, and you pluck it, and you can actually it has like bridges in the middle, so you can pluck a string and then push the string and like bend the notes, sort of.
Yeah, like a steel guitar almost.
Yeah, similar sort of style, like
where it's laid flat.
Yeah, like the ones that you
like
play slide on, sort of a similar kind of look and concept.
And so I'm going to try and mimic the sound on a piano. It's obviously not quite the same, but if we take our same 5 notes, it's like a quick arpeggiation or a slow strum is a traditional sound, so it would sound like this. As the theme develops, we hear another instrument, which again we've talked about before, from Uncharted.
Right, the erhu. Right, and so it's in this again. It's another traditional Chinese instrument, so of course it made its way into the into the score for the Civilization game. But yeah, it's a beautiful instrument. Like we mentioned before, it's a bowed instrument, but it's like suspended strings. It has some interesting sounds to it. It's very much like you would slide it, like a voice almost. So I guess you could argue it's also using microtones as well, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's a non-fretted instrument, which means you can get these pitches that you wouldn't necessarily get on a bass guitar or a guitar or anything with frets on it. You can get these real fine details. It has a real violin-like sound to it, but also a vocal quality.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a human voice when it's played, by like a master of the instrument. But again, similar pentatonic type scales are used when composing for this instrument as well.
Oftentimes you can hear it where you'll have the ear hue in the forefront of the mix. It's never mixed in with the other instruments. It's really a solo instrument with a backing track or something like that, because you don't want to lose that unique quality that the instrument has. All right, before we get to number one, we are going to go over some of our honorable mentions, just some of the themes we didn't necessarily want to break down, but feel they should be recognized.
Right, so one of the first ones here is the Korean theme. It's extremely beautiful, especially the industrial theme. The way it's orchestrated is so wonderful to listen to. So definitely check that one out.
Egypt is another one. We discussed Arabia and the unique elements. Egypt has a lot of that same thing. If you're looking for more of that style to maybe kickstart a songwriting process or something, check out Egypt too. It's great.
Then there's India, of course. It had some interesting history behind the song itself. And then the last one was Mongolia, which is we had a few notes on it because we thought about putting it in the top 5, but it has I think the name of the song that it was originated from translates to something along the lines of long song. And it was like a song that only has 10 words but goes on for 4 minutes. It's really cool. But the orchestration of it too is just fantastic. If you go to the industrial theme and go to like the last third of it, it gets the really
Mongolia, good. I mean, all these are well orchestrated. Mongolia in particular is very well orchestrated and produced, and one of the reasons why we wanted to mention it here.
All right, so now we're going to go on to our number one for this week, and that is Australia's theme.
And so before we get started, we're going to go ahead and take a listen to it. So if that sounded familiar, that's because it's Waltzing Matilda.
This is a very popular song in Australia, an old folk tune. Everyone knows it. It's really not only popular in Australia, but it's popular all over the world. It's
I love this song.
There's apparently, I was watching a documentary. Well, it wasn't a documentary. A guy was talking about it who had traveled all over Australia. And there's like in the city where it was, or in the town where it was written, there's like a gigantic museum dedicated to Waltzing Matilda.
The original lyrics were written 1895 by Australian poet Banjo Patterson and were first published as sheet music in 1903.
Right, and it's pretty simple progression. It's mostly diatonic chords. The melody is very simple. It kind of sits on some one notes for like longer sections. Really, but easy to digest, basically.
We alluded to it a little bit with Congo at number 5. These songs that are in major keys and very major sounding still can be beautiful. You don't always have to use these deep, mysterious themes and sounds. You can get a beautiful arrangement just from using D major and using the 1-4-5. And so waltzing, from the name Waltzing Matilda, is actually slang for traveling on foot.
Right, and that actually originated from the German term auf der Walz, or something along those lines, which means as a young man who's trying to become a craftsman, they would travel all over and meet older men who have been doing craftsmanship all their life, and they would kind of like seek out seek out like apprenticeships with them and trying to learn all they can by just traveling everywhere. Because these people that were waltzing through Australia, they were called like swagmen, which they mentioned in the song, which basically means hobo. So it's people just walking, looking for work.
That's one of the reasons. So it's not in the Civilization 6 theme because they don't have lyrics, but the original tune, that's one of the reasons I love it, is because there's a lot of deep history. We mentioned earlier how when you start researching these other countries and their dialects and their cultures and how they bring about music, you can learn a lot from these countries. This is a great example. It's in English, but I didn't know what.
It's almost like it's not in English.
I know, right?
If you listen to the lyrics, it's really difficult to like. I had to Google all these words and try to figure out what they meant.
But that's part of the fun. You know, you think you know the song or it's in English, so you think you would understand it, but that's not always the case.
For the longest time, I thought it was dancing. But it does kind of have a double meaning. It does also sort of mean dancing, because there was another thing about these swagmen. They would kind of get together and they would dance around fires, and it was always men, right? Not many women hung. I'm sure they were rough dudes. But what they would do is they would have a sack that they would like, well, it was really a blanket that they had all their belongings in, and they would carry that with them. But a lot of them would name the bags they would carry with them a woman's name, and it would kind of be personified as a woman, and they would dance with their bags around fires. Anyway, so that's another kind of double meaning that Waltzing Matilda has.
So the reason why I had it number one, and probably why you had it number one as well, when you listen to some themes or some songs or albums, it might take you a little while to appreciate or love it. You know, I know some themes I've had where it's like you have to listen to it 10 times and you're like, oh, now I get why it's so great. The very first time I heard Waltzing Matilda when I was like 8, I was like, I love this song. I've never heard it. I don't know what it is, but just something about the melody. It's infectious.
It's very true. It was funny when we were researching this, over the past couple of weeks and such, and listening to the music a lot. I walked downstairs. My little brother was there. Well, he's 16 now, but he got a ukulele a while ago, and he got a little book that came with it. And one of the songs he learned was Waltzing Matilda, and so I came downstairs and I played it, and I was like, Aiden, you got to listen to this. And then at first he was listening, he didn't know what it was, and as soon as he realized it was Waltzing Matilda, he was like, oh, it's Waltzing Matilda. He was like so excited about it. It really does. It's such a charming sort of song.
Brazil last week was our number one, and you're like, gosh, I love this song. This is the same thing in a different way, but you hear it, it's just, I love it. You could play that again for the rest of my day, and I would love it every time. And before we wrap up, we teased this last week. We did want to give special mention to Greece. It didn't make our top 5 for either because we wanted to bring special attention to it at the very end, and it is the Song of Sikilos.
Right, this is one of the oldest surviving complete musical compositions that includes musical notations from anywhere in the world.
This is different from the Hurrian hymn number 6, which is considered the oldest known melody, but it's not complete like Greece.
It would normally be played on a small harp in ancient Greece around 200 BC. It's really beautiful sounding, a little strange to the ear. It has sort of like a modal sound to it. We consider it a Mixolydian sound, and it is very strange. It's familiar and strange. And as we were researching this, they've got this song, or this, I shouldn't even say song, this musical composition written on pillars. It's etched into the fabric, and there's something about researching and learning about a song that is the foundation for every song or piece of music that has come after it, and that's why we wanted to highlight it here. All right, so this is what it would sound like. We have a sort of like a harp VST for you to listen to it on. It would be something along these lines.
So as the example showed you, it has a very strange modal sound, like you mentioned, Ian, and the melody doesn't quite go where you would think it goes, and that's from Mixolydian and other elements that I think lend itself to that early sound that they were working towards when it was composed.
One of the last things we wanted to mention was the score for Civilization 6 was actually nominated for the 2016 Best Music of the Year award for a game by Audio Network Guild. It was kind of cool. We were reading up on some of their stuff. They have a great catalog of like they break down the music as well. Of course, audio. So they talk about the audio. They talk about interactiveness in scores. But overall, anyways, it's pretty competitive what they have in there. So we thought it was neat that they were also kind of giving some nods to this soundtrack.
And to give our final thoughts on this, I love, not every theme is great in terms of replayability, I guess you could say, you know, turning on a soundtrack. But you can tell the composers, Jeff Noor and the others that we mentioned last week, do such a great job in learning about these folk tunes and traditional music, and making sure you're doing respect to the individual countries, because it'd be easy just to do something cliche or what have you. But you can tell they researched it, went to these folk tunes that were played and used traditional instruments. And to bring it back to the game, it's very important to get that sound because in Civilization you play these individual countries. It's important to get that sound right to immerse the gamer, because that's what it's about. It's about immersion and making sure the player has a good time and feels involved in the video game as they play.
Yeah, this whole soundtrack was a fantastic project that they definitely put a lot of time and effort into. I mean, all the instruments they had, because they had traditional instruments and they were recorded like live, real players. It's really, really a great project, and it's been great to research. I've learned so much about general history, about music history, kind of where things come from, and it's really interesting. Great project, great soundtrack overall.
It's opened my eyes a lot. You know, sometimes it can be easy to be closed-minded or just think your childhood or these stories you hear are just isolated to where you grew up. We've found out that it's not the case. It happens all over the world, and it's really beautiful to see how these other countries have their own stories that they tell, and these songs that were written, and how it's passed down through generations. And we ranked these themes. They're all beautiful, and if you're ever curious on writing your own theme or how to develop something, listen to the countries in order. And it's such a great job on how these themes can develop from different eras, and you add in sounds to change it but keep the core of it. It's just overall just brilliant.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. We do have a Facebook page we have some stuff on. We have an Instagram page. We need to start getting some stuff up on there too. We're trying to kind of spread out a little bit, so you can search Beyond the Music there. Try to find us. Give us a like. Let us comment. Let us know some stuff that you'd like us to cover. This is of course also posted on YouTube through Brian's channel. So if you want to go on there and let us know some things you'd like us to cover, things along those lines, we'd be happy to.
Anything more you'd like to hear, particularly in a podcast, or maybe an entire topic you want us to cover? My YouTube channel is Orchestra Studio, ORCASTRA Studio. And you also have one as well?
Yes, mine is Music Making Academy. It's pretty new, but you can find some stuff on there as well.
Thank you for listening. Come back next week. We have got part 1 of a special series on Marvel. We are going to be breaking down the Phase 1 movies as we lead into Avengers Endgame at the end of April. So check it out. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.